Hello. Now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about another object-oriented framework, application framework that you use that is Spring Boot. And the main idea about this is to show you that there are a part that actually you are aware of, which are the hooks where you extend your code, where you write your code so that you can extend the framework, and to show that there's a huge amount of code that basically you just reuse by reusing this framework. As I told you, framework applications basically correspond to a design. You are reusing your design. So when you say that, well, I'm developing my application using, or my web server using a Spring Boot, you are just saying that you are using a particular design, because basically the code that is running is Spring Boot with small pieces of your code. So, and what I've done is just I search on the net for design and or architecture, Spring Boot architecture, and I selected a few diagrams, a few figures that I think that show you the architecture. This is interesting because actually when you talk about design, the design is basically a perspective, and this perspective, you can have different perspectives of the same thing. So you look at design from different perspectives. Okay, so this one that I found, and what I would like to highlight here is that these highlights your perspective when you develop a server in a Spring. So you have the client, and in our case is the front end, which actually is not Spring, that does a HTTPS request. So this is probably specific because it could not be HTTPS. This is actually, if it is HTTP or HTTPS, does not directly depend on Spring. Depends on the serverless container you are using. Okay, if it's a Tomcat or an Apache. Okay, and then your request is received by a controller. Yes, you implement controllers. Then the controller sends to the service layer. Yes, you are implementing services. And then the service uses the repository to access the databases and interacts with the model, okay? And use GPA, Spring, or Spring Data, or GPA to access the database. And in the service, you receive a lot of repositories and by dependency injection, okay? So I'm describing Spring Boot, the part you see. So actually the part that you plug into the architecture of Spring, okay? So let's look from a different perspective. So this article refers at Spring. Spring has different type of modules, Spring Social, and so on. So I'm not going to focus on these, but then you have this view. And in this view, you show two things you have. You have the data access, where you have the transactions, and you have different ways to implement a data access. Actually, you are using GPA to implement that part, okay? And you see here aspects and object-oriented programming. This is the part where you basically define the notation. So they have modules so that allow you to define the notations to do code generation so that you can inject and generate code. For example, like generate the code associated with the tag to say that the service is transactional. Then you have the web part, where we have WebSockets, servlets, web portlets, and that is the part where are your controllers. And of course, you have a core that is common to that is used by all these two modules. But actually, your stuff is here, okay? And then it has a bit more, describes a little bit more of it, okay? Then they describe the model view controller, which is basically the basic architectural pattern that all these frameworks follow. And the main idea is that basically you have a module, which is your domain entities, and may include the services, and you may look at services a bit like facades to the module, although it's probably not the way you are completely using it. And then you use the controller. You have the controller, you have the view. So what happens? So the user interacts with the view. This sends an event to the controller. The controller interacts with the model, and then the model answers to the view to says alerts views that have been changed, okay, and then the view grabs data and basically this view presents. So this is a bit different from what we have because this is an application which is basically server side, where the view is dealt by Spring. Our view actually is Vue.js, okay, JS. So with Vue.js, with that, actually you receive a REST request here. We interact with the model, and basically you return. Okay, you don't have this view part. Okay, right? Not at least inside. Inside Spring. Although this part, in some sense, exists inside of Vue. So Vue.js actually implements this part. But okay, it makes sense. I can tell a little bit about what are the advantages of this model. Usually is that this is the stable part and the views change a lot. So you can even see between these two, the module and the view, an implementation of the observer pattern as well. So this is more stable, so it means that you can have several views of the module. As I told you, you can have several, you can have the JavaScript interface for our model, you can have an app for Android or iOS, so you can start having several views of the model. But you have this controller. So here they are representing the same thing, but now you start seeing things that are inside the framework and that actually you do not control, in the sense that there are the advantage of using the framework is that they do work for you. So when you receive a request, you have an handler mapping, and this handler mapping decides which controller to use. So a lot of work is done here. Look, we receive an header with JSON, with the body, and here in the controller, what you declare is very nice variables in the sense that say it is a request body, is a request parameter, or is a pass variable. This work to transforming from what comes in the message into this is done by this. This is done by Spring. So what is nice here is that you just need to plug your code here. That's the hook, it's the controller. That part is... So another question that you may ask, how does the handler mapping knows about your controllers? Because of the annotation. So they look for the annotation, they do a mapping. They try to see if they receive a request, they try to see all the annotations and try to find that request. So that's what is going to be invoked. So, but this occurs behind the scene. Okay, is basically you just need to worry about to write your controllers. This part where you send the response is again the perspective of a server-side implementation, in the sense that you generate the view in the server. So in this case, what they do, basically the controller says which view, so which part of HTML is going to be sent back to the browser, and view resolver basically is just to decide which view. So you give the view name, okay? It's the same that you receive a request and decide which controller. Here you give the view name. You have not implemented this way, but that's the way it works. And you decide which view is going to be sent. But this view then needs to receive the model to basically get filled of data. And then you send HTML here. So that, as you see, so you need only to program this in a server-side perspective and this. In our case, that we are doing basically client-side application, okay? And the server only provides services. You don't have this part. So you interact with the controller, and basically then the controller returns not a view to be solved, a view name to be solved, but returns JSON. So, and because we are using REST controllers. Okay, good. So a different a very similar perspective that details even a little bit more what we have seen is the same. So we have this dispatcher servlet that has a handler mapping, and in that handler mapping you decide which controller, then you decide which view, the view name, you resolve the view, and basically you fill the view with data and transform it to HTML and send it back. Okay? The final thing I'm going to show you, so to see that what is behind the scenes can be rather complex, is what is inside the JWT authentication. Okay, and inside the JWT, what you do this is the user registration. So you do a post. This is the out, and you receive a message. Okay, and then when you do the user login, okay, you get a token, and then for every invocation you send a token. You already realize about that when you have done when you have tested your application with JMeter, the need to keep the token and resend the token. But actually, this is what the application does automatically. Okay, our client is going to be Vue. Okay, and that's the part that is interesting. So you only need to program your controller here. But look, all the part that is related with security, user details service. Of course, we gave you code that already stands. These also provides a little bit of hooks. Okay, so these already provide a little bit of hooks in the sense that you need to extend it. And if you look at our code, basically, we'll find, for instance, this GW token provider, GW token filter that extends things these are hooks in the Spring framework so that you extend your code. So you need to customize that part. We haven't done it because we did it for you. Okay? But there are also some customization here. Good? Okay. And then it works. So that's a lot of code. So that's a lot of code that basically is there for free to you. Okay, so that's the advantage of using a framework. You can get GWT tokens quite simple. Quite simple. Usually, configuring this part needs to have some knowledge. Okay, just the final word in terms of what was our main concern. In this representation, I detail this part a little bit, so to understand what is Spring in this part. In future classes, I will detail how GPA works. Actually, I will spend some time explaining how GPA works, okay? Behind the scenes, in the same idea of all the works the framework does for you, that you don't need to worry, you just focus on your business functionality, on your business code, okay? But I focus on this part, and actually, so it's quite easy. So you only need to define the controllers, put these annotations, and everything looks easy. Okay, I hope you enjoyed.